So today's video is a really exciting one. I'm going to head to Come Through Lab here in Manchester, who are going to be showing me through their lab, going behind the scenes. They're going to be walking me through what they do in the lab, and I'm also going to be dropping in a roll of Kodak Gold 200 that I shot, a 120 roll over the last 24 hours, just kind of like a really snapshot-y kind of roll, but they're just going to process that roll, scan it, and show me the process in the lab. If you guys have been following me on Instagram, YouTube, wherever, then you'll probably know that I've used Come Through for the majority of my work for probably the last 18 months or so. They're an amazing independent lab here in Manchester, and you can also post your film into them. I won't say much more about them, I will let them introduce themselves. But if you do want to check them out and check out what they have to offer, then I will link them as always in the description of today's video.
So this is Come Through Lab. I'm Kieran. We're a photographic lab in Manchester, in Encoats. We do C41 black and white E6 processing all in-house. We also offer fine art G-clay printing. We're kind of born out of a desire to produce a place where photographers and artists in Manchester could kind of have a more central hub and a place that kind of could work on a more professional level with more consistency. So welcome to the lab. So obviously we've got our front desk, a nice cabinet for once full of film, which is very, very rare. And over here we've got well, there's just lots of stuff everywhere at the moment, but this is mainly our printing area. So we do fine art printing up to 44 inches, mainly on a range of Hanamulla papers and Canson papers. And obviously our workbench, this is mainly the printing side of things and the dry side of things. We also have our high-res scanning stations and stuff over here for producing kind of much larger scans from film, mainly to translate into printing. As we come around, we've got my desk here tucked away in the corner. I'm not allowed around anyone else apparently. And then this is kind of the wet side of the lab. So this is where we do all the film processing, where everything gets prepped and spliced for processing. Obviously all of our chemicals, films ready to be spliced up for processing. Then our V30, which is a Noritsu machine, which does all of our C41 film processing. So that's a fully automated process. Essentially, obviously, of all colour film, essentially is developed at the same time, so it allows for a more automated process. So pretty much all colour film will be run through this. Obviously, once it's processed, we've got our film scanning set up. This produces most of the lab scans, so we've got two Noritsu scanners, HS1800, which does the 35mm and 120. And we've got a smaller LS1100, which does 35mm only. Kind of everything that's in the normal process and scan package runs through these, so sort of low-res reference scans are kind of like our standard res scans, or medium res as it is in most places, all the way up to kind of high-res 16-bit TIFFs. Can produce very, very good files, all the way up to kind of 160 meg. Obviously, then anything more critical, we'd usually scan over there on the other scanners for kind of more high-res or larger prints or more critical work. All around, we've obviously got lots of negs that people should be collecting. It's where we get everything cut and packed, so everything's cut and sleeved or continuous sleeved if it's left uncut. Everything's worked through here, and then come over to here. This is the machine we use for our black and white processing, which is kind of a rotary processing machine. So it's fully temperature controlled. The reason we've opted to process like this for black and white is for all black and white films, it's a different time. Well, essentially it's a different time. So HB5, for example, in the chemistry used would be 6 minutes 30, 8 minutes for delta. So this allows us to be very precise with our timings. So each film gets exactly the amount of time that it needs for processing to be as critical as humanly possible. That's all the stuff there. Obviously it translates from here, take it out, gets hung in here for drying, and then goes back into the collection of films for scanning. We try and run through everything as smoothly as possible. So obviously comes off the processor, gets hung up there, gets taken to the scanner. Then we'll get usually we continuous sleeve them, then we can hang them here for packing or scanning after. So everything's hung in these kind of clear sleeves, so nothing's rubbing against each other. We don't get any scratching, all that sort of stuff. We never really like the negs to sort of even touch one another, to be honest. Try and keep everything as separate as possible and as clean and safe as possible. Obviously, once they're in continuous sleeves, it makes our lives much easier. You can take the gloves off, as they can be handled like this, because you're not ever touching the negatives. If anything's for cutting, obviously we take it over here, cut and sleeve them on the light box. And they get packed, name goes on the front, and hopefully they either go out in the post, or people seem to be very reluctantly come and collect them. And that's pretty much the lab. We'll go through the whole process, why not? So once that lands here, obviously we need to associate that to a person. obviously you book your film in front of house or get it in the post and find the order number. What we do is print like a slip, obviously, which will contain all of your details. Busy day, we'll bag them up. It's completely associated to yourself in a bag. You drop it in there. From that point, we'll take it around take you out to where the action happens if you want. So, give it over to Johnny.
I've got to twin check it. So here.
Then you've got twin check now on the film, twin check on the sheet. So, you're number 602, running through all day. That's it. You are 602. Thankfully, we've just gone for another 10,000. That's why I'm 600. Is insane. See, that can now go into like. Well, we usually place them over here or hang them up there for your film then to be associated again for scanning. So with 120, we'll go into this black box here, obviously completely light tight. We'll place the film with the tail sticking out of this light tight container for processing. Take over.
I mean, you can't see anything here because it's all in the dark. But yeah, basically I'm just going to take this backing paper off, put the actual film in here and take the tape off and then pop it in here like this. Like these need to go in. So yeah, they just go in there and it'll beep when it's ready. And then we put it off and hang it up on there.
So the film goes on this splicing deck, as it's called. And essentially, we use this special splicing tape to tape the film down to a leader card. It's made all the air bubbles out as possible, shut off anything contaminating the chemistry as it runs through. And then I've got a film there, ready for processing. Obviously, you push the film into here. Once you close this, the lid will lock. Obviously, it's completely light tight in there. Obviously, the film's then dragged with the leader card through the machine, so it runs down here into the developer, comes back up, it goes into a bleach, back up again into a fix. There's 2 fixed baths, and then it goes through a stabilizer, which is essentially a wash and stabilizes the film. Up through here through a dryer, and then comes out here completely dry, ready for scanning. So colour film is, as I said, it's essentially completely automated. Anytime you might need to change things, it's, again, like we were speaking about earlier about pushing and pulling, so it will need more time in the developer, or the developer to be warmer, for example, which can be worked out. But essentially, all colour film, regardless if it's ISO, its brand, well, see, all C41 films, regardless of their ISO, their brand, they all get processed at exactly the same times. So it's like, obviously it makes life a lot easier for processing. That's why a lot more machines like this were built around C41 with colour film processing. You can get them for black and white. Obviously other labs might use a dip and dunk machine, which we used to use. This allows for like, you know, incredibly quick turnaround on colour processing. Like obviously these machines being built as sort of the 1 hour labs were born from this idea. So how the machine kind of works is it works on like the rep of the chemicals. So like every time a film goes through, it will use a certain amount of chemistry or it will deplete a certain amount of chemistry, which gets dumped, and then like fresh chemicals get put back in. That allows the tank to constantly turn around. So it's kind of with these sort of machines, it's kind of better. The more film that you do, it keeps the tank turning over, keeps the chemicals nice and fresh. Every morning, obviously maintenance-wise, we kind of take over the crossover racks inside the machine. They get washed every day. The main racks kind of get taken out about once a month, which will clean those down. Obviously, if we come across any issues, they get kind of taken out and cleaned. Every morning, like you kind of run what's called like essentially like a calibration strip. So it's like a kind of predetermined piece of film that you buy from like Fuji or Kodak used to make them, and essentially that has like plots on it, which you read with a densometer. So each day you do that, kind of that makes sure like once you've read those, that obviously those predetermined bits of film are exactly exposed to be a certain densometer, to be a certain point on the densometer. So like once you've read those, you know that your chemicals are completely in check and everything's good for processing. The more film you're doing through the day, it's sometimes worth doing one halfway through the day just to check on things. That just makes sure that everything we're doing is like constantly consistent. You know, like it's sort of like the processing. If you keep your processing in check, obviously it means that you're sort of guaranteeing to the client when they drop a film off that you're going to process it correctly. So like obviously, It's good from our side because if someone's exposures are off, it usually means it's on there. I think the idea of like a good lab to me has always been like consistency rather than kind of anything overly garish. I think you should expect to drop your films off and get the results every single time. So that's why, for example, like we use like a certain, for black and white as well, like we use certain chemistry. We always run things exactly the same way. Again, we check the chemicals every day just to make sure things are as fresh as possible. We use single shot on black and white, so that's sort of always fresh. It just means that when like people are dropping off, or they say you're running on like a project, an overall project, you can guarantee that the consistency will always be there. You kind of want to make sure that like, you know, you could drop off last week, drop off in 3 weeks' time, and like sort of the product we're giving you is the same, so that way you can tailor your own photography to suit the kind of the lab that you're using, or you know, most good labs should be doing the same thing, so you should be getting sort of the same, if not, you know, similar if not the same results from kind of any good lab. Also means that things will be easy for printing if you are darkroom printing, and obviously we try and keep the machine as clean as humanly possible. Obviously lots of, you know, much larger labs tend to use like dip and dunk machines. No crossover on the chemistry, or there's nothing touching the film as it runs through on the machine. That is a fantastic way of processing. I do believe that these like Noritsu machines can be just as good in regards to their outputs, as long as they're kept clean and checked like thoroughly and regularly. There's lots of determination between drag machines and dip and dunk machines, but I think they both serve a purpose in the photographic industry. That's the film kind of processed. Got that open. Obviously, we reuse these. So we've got 2 120s kind of ready to come out. The device will take the whole leader as well, so you can hang them side by side. Obviously, like I said, try and hang everything kind of. We don't really like film to ever touch even other film, because obviously even that can cause like minute scratches. So keep everything as separate as possible. Kind of hang the 120s like this, so that nothing's really touching anything. You know, try and like avoid rolling films. And all that sort of stuff, just to make sure that like, you know, it's got the best chance of being as pristine as possible. So there we go, film. Twin check in place, so you are still number 602. Obviously we'd match that now to the job sheet again, so ping that up there, and Beth can take over for scanning.
I'll show you how we scan. On the scanning, I'll show you on here. We've got the 120 carrier on the Noritsu. Put your twin check number in here, which is 642, and it does take a whole roll. So, keep it in. So that's just your blank frame. Here's the photos you took here earlier. You can have a look at editing if you want. So on here, you've got a very basic sort of like editing system. This one here is density, so you can more density in, take it out, make it lighter or darker. Then you've got all your colour balancing tools. So you've got yellow, which you can plus or minus, magenta, and then the cyan, which you can plus or minus. To me, they all look fairly balanced, so I probably won't touch them. We tend to not edit things too drastically. The only instance we might do is if like something's really expired and it's looking really yellow or really magenta, we'll try and balance it out if it's looking very off.
Pretty quick scanning compared to like any other scanning method. Like scanners are super quick, super robust. Obviously means you can make quick adjustments. Then that saves that down in a folder on our server, obviously named 602 or 000000602 or something like that. That means we can then obviously drop that into the WeTransfer. It's easy to find, it's always associated to your name. You then obviously drop that over here. So on the scanning software, this lets you determine like pre-programmed outputs, obviously like medium res, high res, or what we consider like medium res, high TIFF, 16-bit TIFF, low res. Obviously, depending on what you select there, depends how quick it will move through the scanner. Low res are obviously much faster, hence why they're much cheaper. Obviously, we ask everyone if they want them cut and sleeved, so we only ever use like archival or like clear ring binder sleeves, which are like perfect for like contact sheeting through. So if you ever did want to either like scan a contact sheet or make a digital contact sheet or take it to a darkroom, and obviously usually what a lot of people do, or what we used to do back in the day, so obviously you could push that under kind of a glass plate straight onto the paper, so you can contact straight through it, so you'd have to really mess around with taking the negs out and all that sort of stuff. Make sure they're in number order. There's nothing more annoying than that being wrong. So if everything kind of networked, so I can access the scans over here, so if anyone was doing prints from the Noritsu or even from the Imicon scanner, we'd save those down onto the server. And I can access the files from here, so I should find today. There we go. So I can bring it into Photoshop. Obviously, scanned at medium res 645, just like a 48 meg file. So it's pretty good. So natively, without any interpolation, we should. Kind of 16 by 12 pretty much. Obviously that can then be interpolated probably quite a lot further, even from a medium res scan for quite a lot of larger print. Try and keep things, like I said, fairly flat from the Ritsu. Gives people a little bit of room to like kind of work on the levels. Just try and make sure that we don't clip any highlights. Kind of got a nice, or any lose any shadow information. So you kind of gives people a lot to play with on the flip side of things. Like for the most part, we assume that we want to kind of hit the mid ground of kind of giving people usable scans straight off the bat. For those that want it, like lots of people might just get processed and like medium res or low res scans, just want them for Instagram and all that sort of stuff, which is obviously it's amazing. Obviously, we want to produce scans which they can just, people that might not be competent in editing or might not even want to edit, can they're straight away they're usable. But obviously, we also want to hit the ground where people might, make sure there's enough information in the scans that allows people control over post-production if they do want to do it. The printing that we do is all digital printing, so kind of fine art G-clay printing as it's called. Essentially, it's kind of like a very, very, very good inkjet print. The reason we've opted for G-clay printing, obviously it's dry, so it's much easier to run in here. Background was in kind of digital C-type printing or large-scale C-type printing. I think it translates nicely into G-clay printing and fine art printing. It's kind of now they've got the sort of potentially even the edge on longevity. You've got such a massive, broad range of paper types. Lots of control over what you do. So we're a Hahnemühle certified lab, so mainly the papers that we've selected are from the brand Hahnemühle, which is like a German mill. Make kind of some of the nicest papers in the world, I would say. Got quite a broad selection of kind of things that to me replicate kind of photographic prints or traditional photographic prints. Like the Barat is very, very close to kind of like a fibre-based black and white print that you might make in the darkroom. We also stock Canson papers, which is like a French mill. So you've got kind of a photo satin, which is, to my eye, pretty close to like a Fuji's DP2 C-type matte print. Obviously this is a digital print. This duck picture, that's on DP2 C-type. And obviously like the finish is near on. It's pretty much bang on. So you can kind of reproduce kind of like traditional C-type prints. And obviously got the more kind of traditional kind of fine art prints, completely dead matte, like the photo rag, which is obviously like really, really beautiful and perfect for kind of artworks and photography. And obviously that's the advantage that you kind of got from digital printing or G-clay printing, especially like these kind of completely dead matte papers. You can't really do in the darkroom or as a digital C-type print or as a wet print. Again, kind of straight gloss. Kind of your more classic photo prints, like a vinyl print, so it's essentially like a self-adhesive sticker. It's quite fun for like temporary exhibitions, and it's cheaper to run as well. So if you're just like doing a pop-up show or something like that, it's amazing. You can just like literally stick them up, low tack, don't damage the wall, kind of up and down. Someone's picture there. I don't know whose it is. Again, like another kind of in between kind of a photographic print and that kind of fine art print. Obviously, the colours you can get are like insane. It used like a 12. The printers we use like 12 inks. So essentially, like, it can reproduce such a broad range of colour. It's like insane. Like the gamut is incredible. Like almost into like a luminous colours with a violet and orange ink. So you can when you're printing, like working a file up, there's like pretty much nothing you can lose. It's like it's amazing. Other more fun ones like metallic. Again, kind of almost kind of replicates the kind of metallic papers you used to get on C-type printing. And we've got kind of Hahnemühle's kind of new eco range essentially. Amazing papers, like complete like produce like beautiful prints. Obviously this one's a bamboo, this one's a hemp. Obviously those kind of rather than cotton rag papers, which are those kind of traditional fine art printing papers, they use more kind of environmentally friendly, faster growing materials to produce the papers, and so obviously they're much more environmentally friendly. And then like kind of German etching, which is very close to like a watercolor paper. It's beautiful for reproducing paintings and kind of artworks, illustrations, and all that sort of stuff. pretty cool what you can like achieve, you know, like from film. It's like
On satin?
yeah, photo satin. And, like, even from like an Eritsu scan, pretty much what you're getting every time. So pushing and pulling film is where essentially you either underexpose or overexpose the film in the camera and then develop accordingly. Kind of underexpose, you could overdevelop. So essentially, like if you say you push the film, you would change the ISO in camera and then you would give it more time in the developing stage of the idea to like compensate for the loss of light on the film. For the most part, it tends to be more of an artistic choice in my opinion. Obviously you can't bring back what isn't there. Obviously if something's clipped or gone, then it's no, you know, it doesn't exist. They can't just keep processing the film and bring more and more out. But obviously it does have kind of, it does yield like kind of more artistic results. Obviously it tends to be, if you push a film, it'll be more contrasty, more grainy. And obviously some people like to go for that. I think oftentimes it seems to be used to compensate for light, which maybe isn't its correct use, or you know, like, you know, it doesn't make the film suddenly faster or react more to light, but it can, you know. But in my opinion, it's way more apparent in black and white. You can get kind of like more critical results, and depending on the developer you use, you could like even gain a stop on certain films. Obviously, some people like their black and whites to be more grainy or less contrasty, and the pushing and pulling can allow you to control that on the film. And obviously, as you know, when you were printing in the darkroom, it was probably more critical because you didn't have as much as you could do in like on Photoshop or in Lightroom, kind of. So you might have wanted to achieve more in the negatives than you might have to now, whereas lots of people want to shoot flat now, I think, to allow for like better scanning. I think it yields kind of, I think it's always worth experimenting with, and I think it like yields different results for different people. And I think some people like it, some people don't, but I don't think it's like a get out of jail free card for bad lighting situations. People's favourite film stock, it's a bit of a tricky one, to be honest. I think at the moment it's what's on the shelf and what you can get hold of. I think for the most part we get, if we've got it in, people love to shoot kind of Kodak Gold is probably the most kind of, if we get Kodak Gold in, it sells in a day. Like, you know, it's kind of still an affordable price point, I think. It's still a beautiful film, yields great results, it's very easy to shoot. I think, you know, obviously like when you're paying like sort of £10 for 36 exposures, you can kind of be a little freer in your shooting. I think people now, when Portra's kind of pushing up, I think a lot of people I think would like to shoot more Portra or shoot kind of more of the Kodak's professional range, but obviously it's becoming less and less affordable, unfortunately. So I'd say like the most popular film stocks are probably the more kind of consumer films, or what would have been typically consumer films. Kind of Kodak Gold, Fuji's 200, Fuji 400, Ultramax. They're the sort of what we process the most of, I would say. But I think in terms of like the most popular stock, I still think Portra 400 probably tops it for the film that people want to be shooting. In terms of developing film, we process a lot more 35mm than anything else. C41 colour film, 35mm is pretty much most of what we do. About a third of that then in black and white, I would say. And then very, very few E6 these days, unfortunately. Obviously, I think that's determined by price point, cost just for processing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, definitely process mostly C41, 35mm. So where I think film photography is at the moment is, I think it's, to be honest, it seems to be in an amazing place. Like over my career, even working in photographic labs, I was at a lab in London 5 years previous to starting Come Through Lab. And we weren't even processing, you know, it was historically one of the biggest labs probably in the country, maybe even the world. Like regards to processing, you had all the old guys there talking about how people would, you know, they were processing thousands of rolls a day, which is like insane to even, to try and comprehend people bringing in 300 rolls from a single shoot. Or, you know, and I suppose it's easy to forget that like everything would have been shot on film at one time. So the whole Next catalogue or an Argos catalogue, everything would have at one point been photographed on film, all the product shots. They'd all been through a time where that had completely dropped off, and that's sort of where I started at my last lab. And since then, seeing how much film we're getting, it's like insane. Even, you know, pre-COVID there, you know, it was, you know, we were mainly doing like large-scale printing, and the processing had it felt like it almost completely dropped off. People didn't seem to be shooting as much film or wanting to shoot as much film. Although we saw some slight increases going forward. Compared to what we're like processing now, it's insane to think that we can push to like 200 rolls a day, you know, through the lab, which is like it's mad, you know, like, it's like it's actually shocking some days. I'm like, you know, people are doing so much film, like, and I love to see it, and I think seeing the pickup and, like, dare I say it, I feel like even supply issues and like, you know, for a good while, like, demand was way outstripping supply on photographic films. I think even that seems to be starting to level off, but that doesn't seem to be stopping people shooting, if that makes sense. I think it's sort of catching up with one another rather than, you know, people aren't shooting anymore. The creative scene in Manchester, I think, is amazing, to be honest. I think there's so much going on, like, all the time. I think so many people are pushing things out, and I feel like Manchester always seems to be in the shadow of, say, London or something like that, or it's like the second city, which I just don't think is true. I think there seems to be such an abundance of art, photography, creative spaces, but obviously we've got so many, like, amazing studios, like even just like Wellington House, and just how many things are going on down there. Islington Mill, how much stuff is happening there. Obviously, you know, I'm surprised about how much people are dropping in, or how many, like, art prints we're making, and how many people are interested in making art prints, or how many exhibitions seem to be taking place. I think it's like, it's incredibly exciting, and just like, it's so, you know, we're so thankful to be a part of that. It's like, it's insane, you know, like every time someone comes in, they're like, oh, thinking of doing an exhibition. I'm like, wow, that's like, I couldn't even picture that was going to happen, you know, like, I didn't even know it was happening, but it seems to be.
A massive thank you to the team at Come Through for having me. It's always amazing to see the process of, you know, what goes into creating a film photo. So if you are looking for a new film lab, then definitely consider Come Through Lab. As ever, everyone will be linked in the description. Another big thank you to the team for letting me come in and hijack for the day. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.